There had been many times since I was a child when I heard from the people closest to me that they had heard or witnessed urban legends coming alive in their own eyes, but I never believed them. But something happened at my friend's wedding that might not be an urban legend, but it sure as hell was something that related to some myth that came true, as those people could not be living humans. My name is Stephen Williams, a 28-year-old Navy officer. I took a few days off to attend my best friend's wedding, which they had planned to get hitched on a yacht. So I helped them with their wedding preparations since I love the ocean a lot and felt a different connection with it. It was like I had a purpose to serve. That was also one of the reasons why I joined the Navy in the first place. That day I got up early and got ready in a nice suit to attend their wedding. After admiring me looking handsome in the mirror for a few minutes, I left for the port. Soon after reaching there, the ship took off right after all the guests arrived, and right after the preparations were double-checked to see if anything was missing. As I was boarding, I saw a sign that said, "A little bit of mercy makes the world less cold and more just." I don't get it. Why would someone put a board like that on wedding decorations? Sailing deep into the Atlantic, I could feel the salty air on my face, which felt quite good, as you may know as well if you've been on the deck of a ship. That ocean breeze hits entirely differently. So I closed my eyes and stood by the edge of the ship's deck. The soul-soothing ocean breeze made me forget the passage of time. And then I came back to my senses when I heard the announcement on the ship about the bride's arrival. I turned back to the wedding venue where two of my best friends were getting married, Mariah and Carl. A perfect wedding for a perfect couple. There were only 20 guests on the yacht, and after the wedding ceremony's completion, the plan was to stay on Bermuda Island and enjoy some camping for 2 nights before returning. Mariah and Carl took their vows. Everyone started celebrating along with the other guests, and by the time we reached the island, all of us were drunk and hammered. Upon reaching the island, we encountered a group of beautiful women who were dancing around a bonfire. Everyone was intrigued to see them, and one of my best friends, Peter, who was also a common friend of Mariah and Carl's, went straight to talk to them and even invited them to join our party. I found it weirdly uncomfortable and unnecessary to invite them, and said in my mind that it looked like a witch's ritual. While I was lost in my thought, I heard an unnaturally beautiful voice that sounded like the ocean. I turned my head in the direction of the voice and saw a dark-haired, beautiful woman standing in front of me. Her beauty was almost unreal. She wore an emerald stone on her neck, which made her look even more beautiful. I could feel it, even in my bones, that something was not normal about these women. But for some reason, I couldn't speak about my doubts, as if I was under a spell. A few months ago while working, I heard from one of my coworkers that we were giving our opinions about urban legends about creatures who have beautiful, irresistible voices, but they are man-eating monsters. I was curious to explore this myth in depth, but now, having met these women, I was scared and confused, thinking, what if they are what they told me about? So I tried to distract my thoughts by joining the dance, and after it was done, I went to have the wedding dinner. For dinner, we were having seafood and wine. Well, anyone could say that the chefs did their job very well when they were preparing the food, as it tasted delightful. These women joined us for dinner as well and started telling us about their traditions, which even sounded weird. That was when they said they wanted to give the newlyweds a special drink and sing a song for them as gifts. Mariah and Carl took their drinks, and as they were enjoying, these women started to sing. Their voices were so magical, and it felt easy on the ears. We kept listening to them till late at night while enjoying drinks and snacks that were presented to the guests. After they were done, they said their goodbyes and finally left us. It was midnight, and everyone was fast asleep inside their camps, when I heard a noise that felt like muffled crying. So I headed out of the camp. I found Lily out there crying in front of Carl and Mariah's camp. Lily was 8-year-old Carl's niece who had come with her mother, Sarah. Confused by her crying, I went forward and approached her. The moment she saw me, she started running, and by the looks of it, I had no other choice but to run after her. So I took a deep sigh and started running after her. When I caught up to her, she started crying even louder, and even though I tried to calm her down, she kept crying while saying, "They took them! They took everyone with them!" I couldn't understand what she was saying until I blacked out after hearing a familiar singing voice, and by the time I came to my senses, I was near the ocean shore. One of the women from before was sitting next to me as I was lying on the ground looking drenched and cold. My head was throbbing so hard. I put my hands over my head and tried to stand up while asking her, "Where am I? And what are you doing here?" She didn't reply and kept quiet. That was when I remembered that I was with Lily, so I asked her if she knew where Lily was, but just like before, she didn't say anything. Instead, she pointed towards the ship. I didn't ask any more questions and ran towards the ship to look for Lily. I found her hiding in one of the rooms of the ship, so I took her and ran toward the campfire for some reason. I felt like I had to go there. I picked a burning log and set all the camps on fire, hoping that someone would come out, but no one was there. After that, I saw the woman again, but this time she communicated with me and said, "Run, if you wish to survive." I took Lily in my arms, ran towards the ship, and went straight to the captain's room. After working in the Navy for almost 2 years, I knew a few things myself. At the very least, I knew handling a ship is not easy for a single man, but I had to do something. Lily fainted just after that, and I settled her down on a beach near me. I somehow managed to sail the boat on my own and pushed all the emergency help alerts. After sailing into the Atlantic for 7 hours straight, I was exhausted and couldn't keep my eyes open for long. As I was losing consciousness, I couldn't help but hope for someone to come and save us. When I came to my senses, I was in the nursing room of another ship, and Lily was on a bed next to mine. I heard her telling the officers that the woman on an island killed everybody, and how after listening to their singing, everyone was under control. But a woman who was wearing an emerald green stone on her neck saved our lives. I was shocked to hear it because I thought she wanted to kill us since I couldn't read her eyes when they met mine. After we reached land, we were taken to the hospital and got our wounds treated. But the trauma we had been through was even greater. Lily's father got her discharged from the hospital and took her home while I was sleeping. Even though I felt relieved I could help, but feel disturbed and sad about the lives that had been lost. When I was getting discharged, a nurse came by my room and gave me an envelope saying Lily left it for me. Inside the envelope was an emerald stone along with a letter which said, "You are marked, so be ready, as one day I shall come for you." Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. What in the world is going on with me? Why is everything going wrong left and right? We were on vacation, but since the day I arrived, problems followed me at every step. First, I started having stomach problems and could not enjoy anything at all. And when finally my health got better, I came for night diving at my friend's suggestion and thought it would be a new experience as well as adventurous. But first, my gear was defective, so I had to go back to the surface to change into a different one. Then they couldn't find my size for some time. At last, when I got back inside the sea and was exploring the beautiful world underwater, we had to encounter this bloated dead body. As if the predicaments would have stopped there, now we were running away from that rotting corpse that's chasing us. I don't want to jinx it more than it already has by saying, can it get any worse? My guys must be confused. Let's go back and flashback to the day when it all started. 3 days earlier. Hey Orson, what are you doing this week? I was staring at the ceiling while leaning on the recliner while I heard Elias, so I turned my head to get full access to his face. Nothing, just getting bored since the entire week's off. He wasn't even surprised by my wearisome tone as I spoke. That's good then. Pack your bags. I booked us tickets. We're going on a vacation. I jolted up, unable to believe what my ears just heard. A vacation? But where? I asked out of curiosity. Don't worry, it's somewhere nice. Why? Don't you want to come? He was about to walk out the door, but then turned around to ask, Oh, I'm coming. I can't stand this dull routine any longer. My voice was full of enthusiasm now that I had heard of a way out of these uninteresting days. It wasn't just the two of us, but the other two numbskulls were coming as well. The four of us shared an apartment, and while Elias and I shared a room, Wayne and Caspian shared the other one. So while boarding the plane, it was revealed to us that we were heading to Alaska for our vacation. I don't know if we were the chocolate that I ate on the plane or something, but the moment we landed at our destination, my stomach started to ache. I rested for an entire 24 hours while the others enjoyed sightseeing and whatnot, but I recovered after taking a few pills and getting some good rest. After that, I visited a few places along with them, and the very same night, Wayne suggested that we try night diving. Not only that, they immediately brought tickets for us, and since it was here for fun, I thought, why not? Let's try this as well while we're here. They told us a few hand signs in case of emergency, and gave us diving gear before leading us underwater. As we were diving around, I felt water getting inside through my mask, so I signaled to one of the divers who were guiding us that I needed to go up, and then followed him. I told the guy that water was getting inside my mask, so he checked, and it turned out my gear was defective. He had a few more, so we started looking for one that would be my size. It took the guy a while to find one in my size, and right after changing into different gear, I was led back inside the water where the rest of them were enjoying. As we went a bit deeper into the water, I noticed something weird, so I went ahead to check what it was. Others noticed me going out of the way, so they followed me. I could tell each of us went pale the moment our eyes landed on the dead body of a man. It seemed he had drowned here to his death recently. The guide instructed that we should head back and report this now, but before we could go back, I swear that corpse opened its eyes and started swimming in our direction. Okay, back to the present. We were panicking and trying to get away from what we presumed to be probably a ghost or something. Can't explain a water zombie to be exact, and in attempts to do that, we swam away from the shore and ended up getting in the middle of the sea. By the looks of it, we had somehow managed to do away with that ghost, as it seemed he wasn't following us any longer. But unfortunately, we ended up somewhere far more dangerous, as we noticed we were surrounded by water, and since we had no idea which way to swim to get to the shore, we stayed still hoping that the guides would come back for the four of us. As we were in the dilemma, we noticed a party ship heading in our direction. A moment of relief rushed over us as we started shouting and waving to get its attention, and thank God we succeeded. They led us on the boat and gave us a few towels to dry ourselves. Judging by the amount of preparation, there was a party going on there, and we noticed people dancing and having fun as we rested in a corner. Let's just say I've got the worst luck of all our problems to not end up boarding the ship either. Right after we sat on the ship's floor to catch some breath, we heard of a commotion about a young woman around her 20s who had been missing for quite some time. They looked all over the place, but were unable to find her. The way she went missing made it seem like she was never there in the first place. Just when people thought maybe she fell in the water and drowned when no one was watching, another girl similar to her age appeared into thin air. It didn't just end there, because as everyone was panicking while looking around for two vanished women, a third woman in her late 20s had gone, as her boyfriend said she was nowhere to be found. Anxiety, fear, panic. I could sense all sort of emotions coming from the people on the ship, and it wasn't going to be long before they started pointing their fingers at the newcomers on the boat, meaning us. I have seen many horror and crime documentaries to figure out that we had just landed in the mouth of another danger, and this situation seemed to involve a serial killer at that. There was no other possible explanation for two women to go missing one by one other than someone making them disappear, and the ship wasn't that big for anyone to hide them, so probably whoever the killer was, he or she threw them into the sea after getting done with them. Elias went to the bathroom, but was taking too long to return, so the rest of us started to get concerned. As we were about to get up and go look for him, he came back all panicked and terrified, as if that water ghost had returned. But soon, we found out that there was a different reason for his strange behavior when he pointed his fingers toward the third girl's boyfriend and said he saw him dragging the girl and then throwing her in the water. A few more people who were surrounding us heard him, and the word reached everyone's ears within minutes. The guy was captured by the other men almost immediately, and those who had lost their loved ones by his hand demanded that he should be thrown into the sea. Since not a single one was in favor of not doing so, he was thrown in for real. No one bothered to ask or hear his explanation as to what he did to the girls and why would he kill them. Guess that was due to panic and fear that if he were to get lost, others might end up losing their lives. We were taken back to shore, and as we were returning to our hotel, the four of us realized that such vacations weren't for us, and we decided to head back home the next day. We talked among one another, and we would go to some bar or give bowling a chance instead of seeking such adventures where our lives would be on the line.
For context, I am female and currently 21 years old, though at the time of this event I was 16 years old. I've never viewed myself as an attractive person. I've always been kind of chubby. I had bad acne in my teen years. I never cared at all what I wore, and I almost never wore makeup. I was an extremely awkward teen who had barely any friends and next to no self-esteem due to a very abusive relationship I had a few years prior, but that's a different story entirely. My point is that I was a completely different person during this time, and looking back, I know how naive I was and what I should have done instead to better protect myself. So it was the year 2015 and I was going on my very first cruise with my family. It was an 8 days, 7 nights cruise that was taking place a few days after a tsunami had passed nearby. After a rocky start, literally the boat rocked back and forth the first 2 days and everyone was miserable, and me suffering a slight panic attack during a routine evasion drill. I'm claustrophobic and really hate crowds. It ended up being one of the best weeks of my life, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Some of the downsides to this cruise was the fact that it was a North State cruise taking place in October, which meant chilly weather and no swimming, and because it was during a school year, I was the only guest my age on that cruise. The closest age to me, I think, was either 6 years old or 40 years old, so that kind of stunk, although I did end up crushing hard on our assistant dinner time waiter who was around 30 years old and had the sweetest smile I'd ever seen. Anyways, time to get to the meat of the story. So as far as I know, most cruises have at least one formal night where everyone dresses up really nice for dinner and they serve special meals like lobster, steak, etc. As I said before, I wasn't the most attractive person out there, but I did doll myself up for this special occasion. I wore a turquoise knee-length dress, tan-colored high heels, my mom curled my blonde hair, and I put on some makeup that really made my blue eyes pop. I honestly did feel kind of pretty that night. Dinner was amazing and I finally got to try lobster tail for the first time. Loved it. I also, of course, made eyes and mildly flirted with our assistant waiter. I made him laugh because of how red my face would get whenever my dad called me out on it. So after our dinner, my family and I all decided to go our separate ways for the night. There was a bunch of events going on that each of us wanted to get to. Well, except for me, who spent most of the cruise finding random relaxing spots to sit and draw. I was, and I've always been, an avid artist. So anyways, after a couple of hours, I decided I wanted to find my dad for some reason that I don't exactly remember. My mom had told me that he was going to the karaoke thing going on, so I started making my way around the ship, looking for wherever this was happening at. That's when I met him. I noticed him staring at me, and at first it was flattering. Like I said, I was average looking and had next to no self-esteem, so having anyone of the opposite sex look at me and smiling made me feel good. He looked to be not too much older than I was and was dressed in a cruise employee uniform, so I decided to approach him and ask if he knew where the karaoke room was. His smile never left as I asked him, and in a thick Indian accent he told me that he didn't know, but that we could search together for it. I thought it was a little weird at first that he was an employee but didn't know where an event was taking place, but I brushed it off and thought it was possible for some newer employees to not know where everything was yet. So he and I started walking around the ship together and casually chatted while doing so. He told me his name was Felix and was 21 years old. He also, as I suspected, did recently start working for this cruise liner a few months ago. For the record, I did find him kinda cute and liked how comfortable he felt talking to me about his life. As we continued walking around, he told me about how he was born and raised in India, how his family was kind of poor, how rooster fights were illegal back home but he watched them anyways and stuff like that. I enjoyed listening to his stories about life in a different country, considering I've never been anywhere but America at this point in my life. We had eventually stopped looking for my dad and were just walking and talking together. We were now standing outside on the deck and leaning against the railing. I admired how beautiful and ominous the dark water reflected the stars. It was as if we were floating in the galaxy. It was completely beautiful. He then started telling me how lonely he was and how hard it is working on a cruise ship and watching hundreds of couples being romantic together while he has no one. I told him that I understood how he felt because I was also single and hated feeling alone. He looked at me and told me he was surprised that I don't have a boyfriend because of how beautiful I was. I blushed and looked away as I told him that most guys back home don't look at me twice, and he was surprised by that. You know that feeling when someone or something is behind you, and you can't see it, but you know you can sense it's there. Well, I felt something behind my head, and when I turned around to find out what it was, before I realized what was happening, Felix's face was right in mine, and he planted an unexpected kiss on me. I pulled back in surprise, and he asked me what I thought about it. I stuttered nervously and tried to think of a reply. Now, yes, I was a naive young person who was always looking positively at people, but I wasn't completely stupid. This is a 21-year-old stranger who was flirting with a 16-year-old girl. I also had the sudden realization that no one knew where I was or who I was with. Before I could even say anything, Felix started telling me how he knew of a couple of spots on this ship where we could be alone to do things together. I started panicking and really wanted to get away from him. Now, another fault of mine is that I'm way too nice for my own good, and I'm always afraid of hurting people's feelings or coming across as a mean person, even when I'm clearly in a dangerous situation. I'm still too friendly to everyone now, but nowadays, I have much more of a backbone and wouldn't have a problem telling someone like Felix to kindly screw off. But as I said, I didn't have that confidence back then, and I had no clue how to get out of the situation. Felix put his arm around my waist and started guiding me toward one of the areas he was talking about. I started stuttering. Maybe we shouldn't. We just met, and we might get caught, and you'd be in trouble, and my father might be looking for me. I know that sounds dumb, but I was trying to make him think of ways where this could be bad for him, so it seemed like I was trying to look out for him. Don't judge me too harshly. He told me not to worry about it because people mess around with staff sometimes and their boss never finds out. That only made me panic even more. He leaned in for another kiss, and I stupidly let him because I was scared of making him angry. After the long, uncomfortable kiss, I slightly turned away and told him I just wanted to keep looking at the night sky. He insisted that we should start messing around because we don't have much time together. I tried to hold back from crying at this point. And by the grace of the good Lord above, my phone suddenly made a noise, and I noticed my father had texted me asking where I was. I tried to mask my relief, but I immediately told Felix that I had to get going because my dad was wondering where I was and that he was very protective of me. Felix showed his disappointment to me saying that, but then he asked me for my phone number. My heart sank, and I gave it to him. Again, stupid young female who doesn't know how to say no. I'm aware of how foolish that was. It was a good thing I didn't give him a fake, though, because he immediately texted my number to prove its authenticity. Once I thought he was satisfied, I started saying goodbye and walking away. He grabbed my wrists and spun me back toward him and asked for a hug goodbye first. I sheepishly agreed and gave him a light hug. I wanted to start crying when he squeezed me tight and pulled me against his groin and asked if I could feel it, if you know what I mean. I quickly stepped away and sped walked towards my hotel room. I made sure he didn't follow me, and once I was safely inside my room, I hopped on my bed and started crying. Of course, I couldn't tell my parents about this because I would be in trouble for putting myself in this situation, or so I thought. I promise my parents aren't really like that. I know now that in reality my former Marine father would have tracked Felix down and let him know to never touch his daughter again. A few minutes into my cry, and my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number claiming it was Felix. I wanted to block him immediately, but again, stupidly, I was afraid that would anger him and he would somehow find me. So I answered him and we talked for a few minutes. We kept talking about how he wanted to see me again before I left the next day, which at this point I repeatedly thanked God for, and I kept telling him that it just wasn't possible because my parents didn't want me leaving my room for the rest of the night, which was a lie. I did eventually end up leaving my room and asked an older female employee where the karaoke event was, which she immediately took me to. Side note, the room was literally 2 hallways down from where I first found Felix, and I kicked myself for that later. I found my dad and didn't leave his side for the whole rest of the night. Luckily, I was able to enjoy the rest of my night dancing around with my father, and I did hide around him whenever I spotted Felix walking around, who was making it obvious that he was looking for me. I know the story isn't as scary as the most on here, but at the time, it was terrifying to me, and my own kindness could have got me into a very bad situation. The moral to my story is that everyone needs to be careful when going on cruises or other types of vacations. Just because someone wears an employee uniform doesn't mean they're trustworthy. There's many people out there who take advantage of kind people and want to use that against them. Just please make sure whoever you're with always knows where you are, and don't put yourself into risky situations.
I've done a lot of reading up on succubi lately in hopes of finding an answer to this. And I think I have indeed gotten an indirect answer through what people had to say here on Reddit, Quora, and several blogs. I know these aren't exactly the most reliable sources, and they're all written by your average internet users like you and me. But my concern is that they are all pretty much saying the same thing, which is leading me to believe it is valid. But what I'm looking for here is a more direct, clear-cut answer. So I'll get right to the point. I think I might have accidentally summoned a succubus by unintentionally meditating. From everything I have read, I have learned that apparently simply sitting down meditating and telling yourself what you want to call a succubus will not cut it. Now, what I'm about to say is going to sound like the stupidest thing ever. But what happened was that all I did was get horny last night, as I typically do, but definitely wanted to spice things up using binaural beats from YouTube. I am not incredibly spiritual and deemed that I cannot be easily hypnotized, but in a nutshell, I would turn on these videos to play in the background at high volume, either through my speakers or headphones while watching porn. I simply thought this is just a video on YouTube uploaded by some random guy who is trying to get views, that he is claiming to do something that seems cool and all but probably won't do anything or curse you to and bind you with a succubus for 100 days. Don't get me wrong, doing this made the experience way more intense and I loved it. I was able to repeat this experience this morning, this afternoon, and then about an hour or two after that, playing these binaural beats in the background at high volume in an attempt to put me in a trance and make myself truly believe that I was summoning a succubus, but will come to my senses after getting the post-nut clarity followed by brushing it off and going about my day. The problem is, upon researching the symptoms of being bound to a succubus, I fit all the criteria, including feeling her presence while masturbating, feeling strong sexual desires out of the blue, and even including the fact that after I orgasm I feel depleted, drained, and depressed, which for me isn't uncommon. So basically, what I'm asking is, did I mess myself up over here? Or is it in fact just all in my head? Which is another common symptom as well. I don't know the first thing about demons or demonology. I read up a little bit on succubi before, so I knew about them and how they worked going into this. And I understand this was impulsive and a very stupid decision, knowing that these things are demons and are not to be messed with. In other words, I know I was playing with fire, but I think I might already be too late. So all I'm asking for here is reassurance that I am okay, in which my fear will prevent me from risking this again, or for help assuming I successfully am bound to a succubus right now. It's just that isn't the way I went about it. Kinda silly. Like, I went into this thing just being horny and immensely craving sexual pleasure. I did not go into this with any sort of intent or really anything that's allegedly mandatory for any sort of ritual, including meditation to work. But I just don't know enough, and I'm getting a little worried and paranoid about it now. If anyone can provide any sort of feedback, insight, reassurance, answers, etc., it would be greatly appreciated.